Great, thanks Claire. Morning everyone. As Claire said, my name's Emma Weaver, Deputy CEO at the ADHD Foundation Neurodiversity charity. Just to give you a bit of context, I'm sat in my house at the moment, absolutely freezing. I've got the heating on, but I'm really chilly, so I'm hoping that with kind of talking to you guys and getting involved in this webinar, I might warm up a bit, but I hope that you guys are all warm and cozy at home. As Claire said, I'm going to be talking through managing sibling relationships today. So we're going to talk for probably about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. But continue to ask those questions throughout the session, and we'll kind of collect them and answer as many as we can at the end of the session. We're going to be thinking particularly around sibling relationships with a focus on ADHD and autistic spectrum condition. But like if you've attended any of our webinars before, these conditions very rarely travel on their own. So although today's focus is kind of ADHD, autistic spectrum condition, we know that many of our children are actually presenting with other neurodevelopmental conditions alongside that. We refer to that as co-occurrence. But today's focus will be ADHD and autism. So let's get started. So who are we? For those of you that don't know the ADHD Foundation Neurodiversity charity, I just wanted to kind of introduce us really. We're based in Liverpool, but we are a national charity, and our job is to work with lots of people. We work within schools, we work with parents, we work with businesses, anybody that wants to learn about neurodiversity. Our job is to help them and guide them through it. And I just wanted to introduce you to our website. So our website's had a little bit of a revamp over the last week or so. We've got Josh, who is who's helping us with our website, working really hard to try and bring it all together so that lots of information is available to you as parents and carers. So we just wanted to let you know that if you visit www.adhdfoundation.org.uk, it'll bring you to a web page where you'll see at the very top the icons there and the headings across the top. If you click on the section that says for families and you scroll through that web page, you'll see a section that says resources available for families. If you click on that, it'll take you through to our resource hub, and our resource hub is full of lots of information that can be really helpful and free to download, so please feel free to do so. But there's lots of information on there that might just be helpful to you around understanding your child's neurodevelopmental condition. Booklets that I particularly love, and these are ones that we teamed up with Takeda and produced. These were written by the team at the ADHD Foundation, are the three on the right hand side of our screen. Really useful one is Understanding and Supporting My Child's ADHD. So this is a booklet for parents and carers. The purpose of the booklet is to help you navigate and understand ADHD, and gives you lots of information around the presenting traits of ADHD and how we support our children with ADHD. Or if you have a child or young person who is at that stage where they'd like to learn more about their condition with a focus on ADHD, then we've got a teenager's guide and we've got a guide for children as well. My personal favourite is the guide for children, and it's I love it because it's really interactive. There's lots of activities that the children can do, but it just helps them to understand the condition a little bit more. I think it's really important for children to recognise the strengths of their condition, and the neurodiversity movement is about supporting children to understand that actually, although they have a neurodevelopmental condition, it shouldn't stop them, it shouldn't get in their way, and that actually there's lots of strengths to having neurodiversity, and that's what kind of the ADHD Foundation is all about. It's about that strengths-based approach to supporting children and adults with neurodevelopmental conditions to enable them to thrive and do well in life. So that's a little bit about us. We're on Facebook, we're also on Twitter, so please feel free to follow us on those platforms. Those platforms are a great way of learning about kind of events that are coming up, but also interacting with some of the new research and learning a little bit more about the world of neurodiversity. So please feel free to join us on any of those platforms too. So that's us, that's the ADHD Foundation. Now I'm just going to kind of move into our topic, which is supporting sibling relationships. And as I was collecting kind of the information, as I was putting these slides together, what popped into my head at lots of different points throughout the kind of creating of the slides was, how many of us sit at home on Instagram, on Facebook, watching or looking at the pictures of everybody else's families? And how many of you are sitting there thinking to yourself, gosh, their children are really well behaved, gosh, those children seem to get on really well, what lovely relationships their children have got, those siblings seem to get on really well, they seem to love each other and they seem to be really kind. And then you might be looking at Instagram, you might be looking at Facebook thinking, look at how everybody else's children are presenting or how everybody else's children are getting on. And then you look at your own reality and you look at your own children and you think, my children aren't walking through a field holding hands. Actually, my children are fighting, or my children are falling out or bickering. Now, it's common in every single family. Sibling rivalries, sibling kind of conflict and difficulties within sibling relationships is really, really common. Instagram often is not reality. Instagram is often what people want to project, and isn't always what's happening in everybody's household. And I think it's really important for us to hold that in mind a lot of the time, that actually it's very, very natural for children to fall out with their brothers and sisters. It's part of learning. It's part of developing social skills. And actually, it's a really important part of child development to have siblings that you kind of create or experience conflict with, because you learn skills in how to manage that conflict. I was also thinking about what parents and carers have to do every single day to what we refer to as keep the big ship sailing. Things that you have to do to manage your children's relationships. Things like offering distractions. When something's happening within a child's sibling relationship, often we find ourselves as adults having to offer distractions, give ideas of things that they can do just to kind of reduce the chance that something's going to kick off, or that there's going to be an eruption somewhere. You're also really working hard supporting negotiations. How many of you find yourselves in situations where you're trying to kind of mediate between your children? If you've got more than 2 children in the household as well, that can be really difficult to do. Different age ranges makes that really challenging too. I think one of the difficulties when we think about neurodiversity is that in some families there are children, multiple children with diagnosis. So you might be sitting at home and you've got 3 children all presenting with neurodevelopmental conditions, or you might be sitting at home thinking, actually, I've got one child that we know has a neurodevelopmental condition and another child that doesn't. And that can often cause us difficulties as well around how do we manage those presenting behaviours of the neurodevelopmental conditions, but also how do we manage the presenting behaviours when a child within the family doesn't have a neurodevelopmental condition? How do we help them to understand it? We're also often stopping conflict, and by stopping conflict, we might be physically getting ourselves in between children. We might find ourselves preventing conflict by moving children around the house, getting them out of each other's way, just to kind of reduce the chances of conflict happening. But we're also often trying to provide those opportunities for engagement. We're spinning lots and lots of plates. As a parent, especially of children with neurodevelopmental conditions, we're often spinning plates in order to keep a kind of harmonious home environment, and that can be really exhausting and really hard to do. And I want us to keep that in mind when we look at today's strategies. I'm hoping that today's strategies give you lots of ideas of ways of kind of managing that. Being aware of how you're managing, kind of how you're reacting, is really important. Self-care is key to everything. If you're not feeling in a good place, then the ability to manage your siblings' emotional reactivity, or the children's ability to regulate themselves and manage conflict is impacted. So a big thing for me is make sure you're looking after yourselves. Make sure that you're aware of how you're managing conflict situations, and getting opportunities to give yourself a bit of time and breathing space will really help in turn for you to be able to support your children as well, because it's a really difficult job. So why are sibling relationships important? Sibling relationships are likely to be one of the longest, most enduring relationships of our lives. Often there's a quote that says, often our siblings are our first best friend, or our first experiences of friendship. Sibling relationships are really important because they teach us many skills. Depending on kind of how the relationship works, we see skills such as friendship, tolerance, learning how to tolerate another person, learning how to tolerate difference or difference of opinion, differences in emotional responses to things. Boundary setting, knowing actually if I push that person too far, or are they pushing me too far? What are my boundaries within social communication and interaction, or what are the boundaries of other people? I always think back, I'm a twin, and I've got a twin brother and I've got an older sister. And me and my twin brother were a nightmare for my older sister, because we used to team up, because we knew that we could wind her up really quickly. But we also knew where our boundaries were when we pushed her too far. And often the boundary came when we got a whack, or when she was a bit bigger than us as well, and she was a bit tougher than us too. So we were learning the boundary settings, and we were also pushing a few buttons. We were also doing a really good job of knowing how to wind her up. But we were using kind of our skills in our friendship as as twins, but we're also recognizing the boundaries of each other, but also the boundaries of our older sister as well. We learn skills in compromise. You know, it might be compromising when it comes to taking turns, compromising around understanding that actually my sibling might need more of my parents' time right now. I think we certainly see this in sibling relationships where there's neurodevelopmental conditions. Often for those siblings that don't have an ND condition, recognizing that actually maybe their sibling needs a little bit more time than they do. And how do we support a child in that situation? And when I look at the strategies with you, we'll explore that in a little bit more detail. We learn to love and show love. We learn to receive love as well through our sibling relationships. Negotiation skills, I think that's one of the key ones when it comes to siblings. Being a role model, sharing, but also we often learn a sense of humour as well, don't we? We develop our sense of humour through our sibling relationships by kind of that camaraderie that we have with our siblings and our brothers and sisters. Sibling relationships are unconditional. They're not really going anywhere. We don't have a choice until we hit adulthood whether we are in contact with our siblings or not. So it's really important, I suppose, that we do nurture these relationships, because I suppose, as the saying goes, we're kind of stuck with them. We are stuck with our siblings. And what we need to do as adults and as parents is try and support the strengthening of those sibling relationships, because they are going to be together for a long time. They're unconditional and we're stuck with them. Now, sibling rivalry, like I said, is really common. And sibling rivalry is when there's just ongoing conflict between children within the family. That's kind of how the quote, or that's what the meaning suggests. It's when there's ongoing conflict between the children within the family, that's leading to difficulties with interactions, difficulties with relationships, and difficulties with emotional responses as well. Now, there's different types of sibling rivalry. Name calling, so kind of being unkind to each other. Physical fighting, bickering, and I certainly see that. My role at the ADHD Foundation, I work with many families, and often a lot of the kind of feedback that I get from parents and carers is one of the difficulties is just the constant bickering that happens, and over a period of time that can become quite draining. Competition. We see many sibling relationships where there's high levels of competition, and it might be competition for attention. It might be competition for when it comes to activities that they're playing, kind of dominating play. Competition for being better than the other sibling, wanting to show that they're better or stronger or more able than another sibling as well. We also might see jealousy. Apologies, I realise there's a spelling mistake there, but you might see sibling rivalry presenting in jealousy. Power dynamics is often quite common as well. But what we know when it comes to sibling rivalry and neurodivergence, so neurodivergence is when a child has a neurodevelopmental condition. We know that actually sibling rivalry is common in all families, but we often see a higher prevalence of sibling rivalry in families where there is one or more child with a neurodevelopmental condition. Now, some of the kind of things that children say, or some of the conversations that we have when we work therapeutically with children, is that depending on whether you are the child with a neurodevelopmental condition or not, these are some of the kind of ways that a child might feel, or how they might feel when they're experiencing those sibling rivalries. There might be a sense of being overlooked. There might be jealousy. And I think I certainly recognise this when there are siblings in the family where there is maybe one sibling that requires more support. So families that I've met where there's been one child with ADHD or an autistic spectrum condition, and then another child without those conditions, actually feeling quite jealous of the fact that their sibling has got a condition. I worked with one sibling of a child who was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum, who said to me, and his words were, "I know autism isn't something everybody wants to have, but sometimes it would be nice to have it because it means I get more time with people and it means I get more space with people." And I thought that was a really interesting kind of perspective from that child's point of view. And this is why making sure that we're giving time and kind of spreading our time across siblings is really important, to help them understand as well kind of what's happening from their siblings' point of reference. You might also find that they're confused. I worked with one child who was a bit confused about their brother's ADHD. Didn't really understand ADHD, didn't really understand what impulsivity meant, didn't understand why his brother found it really hard to sleep at night time. Also, one of the things that he particularly found confusing was why his brother's emotions went from 0 to 60 very, very quickly. And why, when his brother's emotions went from 0 to 60, people gave his brother a little bit of space and gave his brother time to calm down. But when he went from 0 to 60, he was told that he should know better. And he became quite confused by that. You might actually find as well, for some siblings, there's embarrassment there. And I've worked with many siblings who have said, actually, when I'm in school and my sister has been sent out of the classroom, or I can hear my sister being told off, or I know my sister's in trouble because they've done something maybe impulsively, or as I've had a situation that's been difficult, that they felt embarrassed by their siblings' behaviour. You might actually see that they're overprotective. I worked with a set of siblings, both diagnosed with ADHD, and the older sibling became incredibly protective of their younger sibling, really because he had experienced situations himself and wanted to look after his little brother and make sure that his little brother was protected, knowing what the situations were like for him in some of the conflicts that he found himself within, friendships within school. You might find that they're worrying about their siblings. So I worked with a family where there was an older sister and a younger brother, and she would just worry herself sick about, is he okay? Has he got friends? Do people like him? Do people want to play with him? And she'd often become really worried and upset when she saw him. He joined the primary school, same primary school as her, and he joined in reception. And she said that she'd just sit and watch him in the playground, worrying to see whether he was making friends with other people and whether other people were being kind. We might see that there's sadness, and sadness around sadness that my brother or sister has got a neurodevelopmental condition, or sadness for myself that I've got a neurodevelopmental condition and my brother and sister don't, and that actually they find things easier. Life feels easier for them than it does for me. We also see loyalty, and I find this quite frequently where it's that I've got your back, and this is the strength of a sibling relationship. I met a family at one of the Witherslack conferences actually only a couple of months ago, and they were talking about their children and how there was like fierce loyalty between the siblings, that kind of, I've got your back, I'm going to protect you and I'm going to look after you, and if anybody says anything negative about you, I'm gonna kind of go in on them and tell them where they're wrong. So these are all of, I suppose, the feelings and the thoughts that happen, and the things, I suppose, that we need to take into consideration when we're thinking about siblings and neurodevelopmental conditions, and recognizing that maybe these are the thoughts and feelings that our children are going through or experiencing. Now, the reason for kind of neurodevelopmental conditions, and I suppose some of the key characteristics I refer to, and if you've seen us speaking before, any of our staff at the ADHD Foundation, we often refer to key characteristics. And key characteristics are some of the kind of golden threads or themes that run through neurodevelopmental conditions. And I've just put a few of them, and I'll put them on the screen for you here. These are just some of the key characteristics of ADHD and autistic spectrum conditions, which might lead to a higher likelihood of sibling rivalry or sibling difficulties. First one is emotional reactivity. We know, and the research tells us, but also what we know from understanding the traits of ADHD and an autistic spectrum condition, is that often children with these conditions have a higher likelihood of emotional reactivity. And emotional reactivity is a particular sensitivity to their emotions, very quick to react, very quick to feel their emotions. I had an adult with ADHD, and he explained emotional reactivity to me in the best way. He said that often people say I overreact or I'm a little bit dramatic. He said, I just wish people would reframe it and say, actually, I'm not dramatic, I just overfeel. He just explained that for him, his emotions are just really strong and he overfeels. He's very sensitive to the way that his emotions make him feel, which leads to this increase in emotional response. We also know that, particularly with ADHD, there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And RSD is basically known as a particular sensitivity to rejection or negative feedback. Lots of research is happening about RSD, and it's certainly worth having a little bit of a look into. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria. How this presents in children and young people is a child that finds it really, really difficult to manage negative feedback, critical feedback, or when they feel like they've done something wrong, or if they've been told that they've done something wrong. It's a real kind of overreaction to rejection. And this can lead to low levels of self-esteem, but also real sensitivities to that negativity, which can then lead to sibling rivalries. If a sibling says something to me, an off-the-cuff comment, but if I'm particularly sensitive to that rejection or that negativity, you might see an over-response or an over-feeling to their emotions and how they deal with that. We also know that for many people on the autistic spectrum, they have a difference with their theory of mind. Theory of mind is being able to see things from another person's perspective. Now, if you have difficulties or a difference in seeing something from another person's perspective, it can often lead to rivalries because you can't understand things from your sibling's point of reference. A theory of mind difference is a difficulty with recognizing the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of other people. And for some people on the autistic spectrum, that can lead to difficulties within their social relationships because they're struggling to understand the kind of where that other person's viewpoint stands, why that other person sees it differently to them. We also know there's impulsivity, and impulsivity with ADHD is behaving before thinking. We often see with ADHD, the ADHD impulsivity trait is that lots of sibling rivalries happen because an ADHD sibling might be impulsive behaviorally, or they might be impulsive with their speech. So we often see that lots of our siblings can have verbal fallouts because of something that's been said, because that word came out before thinking about the impact of my words and what that's had on my sibling. We know that there are executive functioning differences with neurodevelopmental conditions. So executive functions are our abilities to regulate our emotions, regulate our impulses, but also plan, organize, and prioritize. So for some children, if you have a weakness in your executive function, that might mean you need more adult support to help you to plan, organize, and prioritize. Now, if we think about that from a sibling perspective, for a child with a neurodevelopmental condition, if they're needing more adult support with the morning routine, or they're needing more adult support when it comes to their homework, planning, organising, problem solving, then actually that might lead to sibling rivalries because the child that doesn't have a difficulty with their executive functions is often left to kind of manage those things on their own. We know that there are sensory sensitivities. So because of our environments can feel really overwhelming. Our sensory systems can often become overwhelmed because of loud noises or smells or visionary input within our environment, which can lead to a heightened sense of emotional reactivity. But we also know with the likes of an autistic spectrum condition that difficulties with social communication and interaction can also lead to those sibling rivalries. Social communication is the ability to explain and use your words to communicate with others. Interaction is the ability to know how to kind of do that and develop relationships, maintain relationships, but also understand that somebody else might want to do something differently to you. So because of neurodivergence, because of the key characteristics, this is often why sibling rivalries are more common within relationships where there is a neurodevelopmental condition, just by the very nature of neurodevelopmental conditions and the kind of key characteristics that I've listed on the screen there. That's why you're probably sitting at home thinking, actually, this is why I see these difficulties within the relationships, just because of the very nature of neurodevelopmental conditions. So with all of that in mind, being mindful of the fact that there is a higher prevalence rate of sibling rivalries with neurodevelopmental conditions, but actually sibling rivalries is common in every family. I'm going to talk you through some strategies. How can we help our children? What can we do to kind of support them in all of this? A big one for me, and this is for all children within the family, so not just our children with an ND condition, we need to be celebrating strengths. We need to be recognising the good things that our children bring to our families and helping them to see that too. Having conversations about what's good about me. I work with one family and they got a jar, and each child, there was 4 children in this family, 2 with a diagnosis of a neurodevelopmental condition and 2 without. And each child had a jar and they had to write down what's good about me. What's and not just about the things that I can do, but also the things that I am. So one child wrote things like, I've got a lovely smile, or I'm funny, or I'm so more to do with kind of what it is that they are as a human being, but also what's good about me and the things that I can do. What key skills can I bring to the family? I worked with a child within this family who was on the autistic spectrum, had a real attention to detail, absolutely brilliant with anything tech. So anything that broke in the house, any of the iPads, any of the laptops, or any of the tellies, this child was the go-to child. And that was the unique skill that child brought to that family. Also, what can I do that helps my siblings? So within this family of 4, one of the children that didn't have a neurodevelopmental condition, what she put in her jar was that she can help her little brother to manage when he's feeling a little overwhelmed. She can guide him. She understands when his sensory world becomes a little bit overwhelming, and she knows in what direction she can point him in to help him. But what we need to recognize when we're celebrating strengths is that each skill for each person is just as valuable. So it might be that one child in the family is brilliant at tech and fixing all the things in the house, but another child within the family might just be really good at giving us all a smile and making us feel happy or making us feel warm and looked after. Each skill is a strength, and it's about recognizing those strengths and supporting our children to understand their strengths. And I always use it when I talk about a strengths-based approach. I always use a picture of our umbrella project, because that's what the umbrella project at the ADHD Foundation is all about. It's about recognizing our strengths and celebrating those. I think promoting self-awareness is really important for all children in the family. If there's a child within your family where we know that they have an ADHD or an autistic spectrum condition, and we know this because they've been diagnosed, helping them to understand that condition can be a really good starting point. And these are just some really useful books that might be helpful. One of my favourite books of all time is the Umbrella Gang comics. These are free on the ADHD Foundation website. They're on the resource hub. These are comics that have been written by children and young people with neurodevelopmental conditions. So we've got our young ambassadors at the ADHD Foundation who feature in the comic. There are now 3 volumes of the comic because they've been that popular with our children and young people. And it's basically these characters within the comic are talking about their neurodevelopmental conditions, but from a strengths-based perspective. So it's helping children to understand their ND condition. There's some other books that can be really useful. If you've got a teenage girl with neurodevelopmental conditions, the Spectrum Girls Survival Guide, which was written by Sienna Castellon. Sienna Castellon is a brilliant role model for neurodevelopmental conditions and the neurodiversity movement. She created Neurodiversity Celebration Week. She is a young female who has many different neurodevelopmental conditions, but talks about how they've helped her, how she has become an awesome autistic female. My Awesome Autism is another lovely book, but also just maybe books that celebrate difference. So the book at the bottom there that says different, a great thing to be. Actually helping children to understand that difference can be a really good thing. Seeing difference and recognizing that we aren't all the same, and actually we all bring unique abilities and unique skills to our interactions can just really help children to kind of have that self-awareness and sense of self. I think if there's a sibling within the family without a neurodevelopmental condition, also engaging them and understanding what their brother's ADHD looks like, why their brother maybe responds in a certain way, helping them to understand emotional reactivity, understand impulsivity and hyperactivity can just open doors for a sibling to, I suppose, be more understanding of their brother or sister's kind of responses or behavioural reactions to situations. Something that's really important is creating opportunities within the family routine for each child to contribute to something, for each child to have a developmentally appropriate job within the routine. So when you think about, for one child, actually, if they've got a difference with their executive functions, if they find planning, organising difficult, tidying up can be really hard for them to do. So, you might have one child that's bedroom is absolutely immaculate. I was at a children's home last week, and they were talking about the difference between 2 siblings. One sibling's bedroom was absolutely beautiful, really well organised, really tidy, everything's had its place. You walk through the door of the other sibling and it was like a bomb had gone off in that bedroom. Clothes everywhere, books everywhere, toys everywhere, just a totally different presentation within that bedroom. But actually what we know about those 2 siblings is that one of them had ADHD, which meant that their executive functions were weak, which meant that actually their ability to tidy, organise, make sense of their space was really, really difficult. So actually what the job for that child was to help with the washing up, because that child was very physical. And we were laughing because they said for this child to do that job, this child needed to be moving quite a lot. So there was a bit of a panic around washing the dishes. Don't smash anything. Don't move away from the sink, because I don't want any of my dishes ending up on the floor in a heap. but actually play to the child's strength. The child with ADHD needs opportunities to move. Routine tasks like helping washing the dishes can be really helpful. And actually for the child that's really good at tidying and organising, then maybe they can tidy the front room after you've all been sitting. But I suppose it's opportunities to contribute. If every child within the family, or every adult, every family member is contributing to something, it helps to build self-esteem. Children love a job, children love a sense of responsibility, and I suppose it's about finding what they can do and then giving them opportunities to contribute to that. Where possible, providing one-to-one time for each child is really important. I certainly reflect on some of the families that I've met where parents often feel a sense of maybe guilt that the child with a neurodevelopmental condition is getting more time. Now, I think it's important for siblings to understand why that is, that actually for our siblings with an ND condition, they do need more of our time, but also helping them to understand that there will be time for them as well, and finding a time for them is really important. You know, doing tasks together, helping them with their homework, watching TV together might be a nice time, reading a book, playing a game, walking, just going for a walk and having a chat as you're walking and talking. Just thinking about making sure, I suppose, that we're prioritising time together with all of our children. Recognising, and I worked with a family where they kind of scheduled it into the daily routine. They used a visual timetable for it, and actually it was, this is your time, what do you want to do with it? One mum that I worked with, she found that the nicest time, or kind of the best time that she could kind of be relaxed and kind of give the most time was just before bed. So she would spend 15 minutes just before bed, and they'd do different things. They'd play games, or they'd just sit and have a conversation, or they'd read a book together. And it was just that time. It was every single night, and the child knew that that time I would get 10 to 15 minutes of my mum's time before I go to bed. Bedtime might not be that time. You might be sitting there thinking bedtime for us is absolute chaos. It might just be first thing in the morning. It might be just as they come in from school. It might be the walk home from school, asking, you know, having those conversations. How's your day gone? What have you been up to? But I suppose it's just having in the back of our minds as adults, how much one-to-one time have I given to each of my children? Is one child getting more of that one-to-one time, and maybe why? And it might be because they need that. And how can I help the siblings understand why that child needs that? But how can I also help the individual children know that they will get some of my time? And I suppose it's about negotiating that and helping each other, everybody, to understand when that's going to happen and why that's happening. I think something that's really important as well, as I was doing a bit of research around all of this, I read an article that said, when conflict happens, when a behaviour or a meltdown or something happens where a child has lost control of their emotional self-regulation, it can often take them between 15 to 20 minutes to come back down. So we often refer to flipping the lid. So flipping the lid is when our chimp brain, if you picture, everybody has an inner chimp, and our inner chimp is the limbic system, the kind of middle part of the brain that is our fight, flight or freeze. It's very impulsive. It's driven by our emotions. This sits in the middle of the brain. Now, when a child has had an emotional reaction to something, what happens is the logical part of the brain, which we call the cortical part of the brain, which is at the very top here, it will often switch off. And when it switches off, what we refer to is our children will often flip their lids. Now, when they flip their lids, it means that their emotions have taken over. We see a lot of emotional dysregulation. We see a lot of children struggling to think logically, to think practically. So actually at this stage, when a child has flipped their lid, logical thinking often goes out the window. So what the research was telling us in this article that I read said that for what we need to do is we need to give space and we need to give time. And it can often take children between 15 and 20 minutes for the lid to come back down. When the lid comes back down, that's when a child can then talk about what happened, can maybe then explore reasons why, but we can also have conversations with them about what happened and help them to understand things a little bit better. But we've got to give them time. So understanding that that can happen, understanding that when a child has flipped their lid, particularly if it's a child with a neurodevelopmental condition, they are more sensitive to flipping their lid because of the structure of the brain and because of the nature of neurodivergence. We have to recognise that actually we need to give space between kind of experiences. Giving time apart after conflict can be really helpful to just bring calm back into the situation. Because if we try to kind of manage the behavioural situation when a child has already flipped their lid, because logical thinking has switched off, bringing that child back down can be really hard to do. So space is really important. Obviously making sure that the children are safe and within the home environment, but giving space can really help to bring that rational thought back down, can really help to enable children to calm themselves and then come back into conversation and understand what happened. Now, space is really important, but also thinking about how we can then reflect on what's happened for our children. So if there's been a situation where there's been a fallout, maybe siblings have become really physical with each other, or maybe verbally they've had a fallout, and then you're kind of having to deal with the aftermath. Each child's flipped their lid. When the children's lids have come back down and they're thinking rationally, this can be a really lovely way to reflect on what's happened. We call this the problem solver. And the problem solver, it's meant to be done in a really non-judgmental way. So this isn't done as a consequence. This is just a reflection tool. So when a situation's happened, let's write it down. Let's have a think about what happened. So we start with the first box, and we externalize the thinking by getting it down on a piece of paper. And you write down, tell me what happened. And it's really interesting because if you do this with both siblings that were both involved in the conflict situation, the perspectives are probably quite different. So doing this together can be really helpful because you're supporting theory of mind and you're helping to see things from each other's points of reference. So tell me what happened. You then go to the left-hand side. What did you do? So what was your behavioural response? What did you physically do within that situation? And then what was the consequence of that? So what happened as a result of that behaviour? So an example might be a child has said something unkind to their brother and their brother has given them a whack. So you might write that in, tell me what happened. What did you do? I said something unkind. Okay, what did your brother do? He hit me. Okay, what was the consequence of that? The consequence of those two behaviours were we fell out, we got upset, and we've had our Xbox taken off us tonight. You then go down the right hand side. What could you have done differently? So when your brother said that to you, what could you have done differently? Or when you felt the need to lash out because your brother said something unkind to you, rather than doing that, what could you have done differently? So it might be you talk about ask for a parent to come and help you, maybe go and practice a regulation strategy, maybe move away, get away from the situation. I suppose you're giving them that kind of inner script, helping them to think about, when I find myself in this situation, what can I do to manage it better? And then if you had done that different thing, if you had walked away, or if you had got mum or dad or nan or older sister to help you, what would the consequence of that action have been? And naturally, it's a more positive one. So it's that, well, I haven't had my Xbox taken off me, or I haven't fallen out, or I haven't felt upset, or I haven't upset mum, or I haven't upset somebody else within the family. But the problem solver can be really helpful. I always say externalize it. So by writing it down, that can really help children with ADHD in particular, because they can see it. When I can see it, it makes it more concrete. It also helps us to process better when we can see it. This is another lovely one, and this is when you're trying to build a picture of what's happened. So you know those moments when you've heard chaos happening upstairs in the bedroom and children come running downstairs, and then you are trying to piece what's happened. All you've got is 2 kids or 3 kids that are coming to you really upset with the situation. Now we can help to build a picture for reflection, but often asking about what happened can be really difficult for lots of our children to reflect back on. So it can be often, we refer to, for some children, when they flip their lid and they're in that emotional state, they often don't remember what happened within the situation. But we can help them to piece that together, and we help them by noting down what happened afterwards. So we ask children to describe, how are you feeling now? So what's happened afterwards? Because they will always remember the most recent event. We then explore it further by asking, well, let's track back what happened before the situation took place. And then we reflect on what happened during the conflict. Now, when we do that with children, particularly with our children with neurodevelopmental conditions, reflecting on the before and the after the behaviour, and then looking at the behaviour kind of as a later on, helps them to build a picture. It prompts memory. So it helps when you think about actually emotionally, how was I feeling afterwards? And what do I understand happened before it? What were the reasons for the behavior taking place? It then helps them to build a picture better rather than going directly for the behavior, directly for that center one. Getting it down on paper, again, externalizing it can be really helpful. Drawing it, this is where comic strip conversations can be really helpful. I've worked with one child, and this is what we do as a reflection all the time, and we draw it. So we draw what happened afterwards, we draw what happened before, and then we draw what happened in the middle. We draw the behavior or the conflict situation. And that visualizing it, that externalizing it, just really helps the child to reflect on what's happened. But again, it's done in a non-judgmental way. Building understanding across siblings is also really important, understanding of tolerance levels. And I like to use this one. This is called our stretch zone analogy. Now, this is where we can help siblings to understand when a child, or when our brother or sister is becoming really stressed. And when they're stressed, that's when they flip their lid. And when they flip their lid, that's when we then see that emotional reactivity. Now, I'll explain this in a little bit more detail. So you can see the different circles on the image there. The idea is that we all, at different times of the day, at different times of the week, or in certain situations, we will all sit in one of these circles. So some of us might sit in our comfort zone, and our comfort zone is where we're most comfortable, where we're happy, where we're just kind of coasting along. So if we think about a child's comfort zone might be sitting on the Xbox for hours on end without being interrupted or without being asked to do anything kind of particularly. We then have all sit in a stretch zone as well. And a stretch zone is when we're doing something that, I suppose, our anxiety levels increase a little bit, but they increase as a motivator. So they're good for us. The stretch zone is a really good place to be because that's where we do our learning. So for a child, a stretch zone might be sharing the Xbox with my brother or my sister. So, you know, I'd much rather be doing it on my own. That's where I sit in my comfort zone. But actually, if I share it and we play a game that we both enjoy, we're in the stretch zone. But then there's also the red zone, and the red zone is the zone that's not a good place to be. The red zone is when we're really stressed, when we've flipped our lids, logical thinking switched off, and actually we're just feeling really stressed and really overwhelmed. Now, from a child's perspective, if we use the Xbox idea, a stress zone for another child might be when we're playing on the Xbox and we've got people from other households tapping in, we're doing it online, and we're playing a game where that sibling isn't enjoying. It puts them into the stress zone, and that's when then everything goes a bit wrong and up the wall. Now, what we can do is we can talk with our children around what things would you write in those different zones? What things in our house make you feel stressed or might make you flip your lid? Or what things might you need some help with if that's the case? And you can write it down. We write these down in a 5-point scale. So 5-point scale is 1 to 5, 1 being when I'm in my comfort zone. What are the things that I do that show that I'm in my comfort zone? How do I feel when I'm in my comfort zone? And what does that look like to everybody else in the family? The stretch zone is when I'm wobbling a little bit. What does that look like? But I'm learning in the stretch zone. So the stretch zone actually is a really good place to be. So what things in the home, the family home, or when we're out and about as a family, what stretches me, but I'm okay with it. So it might be going out for a family meal and sharing a pizza with your sibling. I'm okay with it. It stretches me a little bit, but it doesn't put me into that stress zone. And then at 5, you then do exactly the same. What things would put you in the stress zone where you flipped your lid, you're overwhelmed by your emotions? What does that look like for you, and what does that feel like? Now, if you can get that down on a visual like this, a picture, what you're helping siblings to understand is tolerance levels. You're helping, I suppose it's a bit of negotiation. It's helping to understand actually when my sibling is in this situation, this is when I know they're overwhelmed. But this is where, when they're in their stretch zone, I know that this is really good for them. And talking in that language can be really helpful, particularly if you've got teenagers at home and they're trying to understand each other's points of reference. Supporting communication of feelings is also really important. Having things at home, visual supports where children can do some feeling checking can be really helpful. I love blob people. The picture on the right hand side, you can get a book and it's called The Blob Tree. They have a website, blobtree.com. I've got one family, they've printed off one of these pictures. And the purpose of the blob people is for children to either colour it in, talk about it, or put a big circle around which blob represents them and how they're feeling. So this family that I met, mum printed it off, It was on the fridge and they just did a check-in. And the check-in might be a verbal one. So which blob represents you right now? How are you feeling? And they do it throughout the day. So it doesn't need to be when an emotional situation happens. It's like, let's do it at breakfast, let's do it at lunch, let's do it at tea time, or let's do it just before we go to bed. And each child checks in. So you might have a conversation about it where they're able to say, oh, I'm blob 20, I feel great, and I feel great because of this. Or a child that maybe is struggling to communicate how they're feeling, they might just colour it in. By colouring it in, they're giving us, I suppose, a little bit of information of how they're feeling. It's helping other siblings to understand how my brother or sister is feeling. So actually, if my brother has coloured in number 14, and you can see on the picture there, number 14 is the one that's just fallen out the tree. Actually, my siblings coloured that in. Maybe I need to kind of keep away for a little while. Maybe they need a little bit of breathing space. You can also do emotional check-ins like this one on the left-hand side, and you could use images to support that. Personally, I really like real life images. I think facial expressions can be really helpful. So real life images of human faces can really help children to understand. I've got one family in their emotional check-in. It's on, again, it's on the fridge. They've just got 4 pictures, happy, sad, worried, and angry. And the children just check in by putting their picture on the emotion that they're feeling. For older children, you might just want them to journal how they're feeling. Writing down their emotions can be really helpful. They might just want to do it. They might just text it to you. I've got a family and they're teenage. They do a regular check-in, and the check-in is done on a WhatsApp group, and it's just, how are we feeling? Happy, sad, worried, or angry. And it's just a regular check-in throughout the day. But if we can support the communication of feelings, but if we can support that in a shared way, where we're all understanding how each other are feeling, that can really help with sibling relationships. It helps us to understand where our siblings might be sitting and how they're feeling and how they're reacting. I think it's also important for us to promote self-regulation, help our children to help themselves. It's really important, particularly with neurodevelopmental conditions, that children understand their emotions, but understand their physical reactions to their emotions and what they need to do to regulate and manage some of those big feelings. I work with lots of children who they talk about things like, when I feel I'm overwhelmed, my breathing changes. I've worked with a 6-year-old who says her lungs get really big. I worked with an 18-year-old who says he feels like he gets lightning in his feet get sore and his feet get hot. Now, that's a child demonstrating to us what's happening when they're becoming overwhelmed by their emotions. Their fight, flight, or freeze reaction has kicked in. And for some children, when they're in fight, flight, or freeze, their behavioural response might be to their breathing gets heavy or their mind gets full. Often these children will benefit from breathing exercises, introducing them to some relaxation techniques where they can do some breathing. Calming down the mind, calming down the body can be really helpful. Weighted resources can be really useful for that as well. But actually, lots of children that I meet, breathing exercises wouldn't work for them, and it needs to be something more physical. So resistance activities can be really helpful. Using resistance bands at home, so recognising, actually, I'm feeling a little bit wobbly. I'm getting lightning in my hands, or my hands are starting to feel hot or sweaty, or I'm feeling the need, I'm feeling unsettled. A resistance band, just those resistance bands that you can get in sports shops, you see them at the gym all the time. Something to pull. Wall push-ups can be really helpful as well. Monkey bars. One family that I work with, they have monkey bars outside, and the children just go out there when they're feeling a little bit dysregulated. Let's just go and pull our bodies up on the monkey bars. The gym, dumbbells can be really helpful for our teenagers as well, regulating that kind of fight, flight, or freeze reaction by using weights, and heavy weighted activities can really help. So I suppose to calm the limbic system. If we're doing those as proactive strategies, then that can really help children to be less likely to flip their lids. So if they've got opportunities to practice self-regulation strategies throughout the day, whether that's resistance activities, weighted activities, or breathing activities, then actually we're taking a proactive, we're keeping the limbic system calm, which in turn, fingers crossed, would lead to less emotional reactivity, because I suppose the limbic system needs are being met. We can also support impulsivity, and this is my favourite one. This is a coaching strategy that we talk about quite a lot, and this is where we create a bit of a mantra, I suppose, for our children. And the mantra is, let's stop, let's think, and then let's do it. So if you've got an impulsive child at home that's behaviour happens before the thinking, we use this as kind of a verbal mantra. So let's just stop, let's have a think, and then let's do it. So, and you can practice stop, think, and do in every situation. You can practice it when impulsivity is happening. So and impulsivity can be really hard to catch because it happens like that. But if you've been lucky enough to catch the impulsive behavior, when the impulsive behavior is happening, we just kind of intervene by saying, let's stop. Let's have a little bit of a think about what we're doing. Is this a good choice? Is this a bad choice? What can we do to make this a good choice? Or we can practice stop, think and do when it comes to things like crossing the road. If your child's very quick to run across the road, before they go and do that, let's stop, let's think, let's do. We just, I suppose, by using that mantra, by using stop, think and do in lots of our examples with our interactions with our children, we're giving them that kind of verbal script of before I do something, it's important that I stop first, that I think about it, and then I complete the action. So when my brother's winding me up, if I've had stop, think and do mantra being spoken to me at home, maybe I can implement that when I'm feeling frustrated by my brother's behavior. I'll stop, I'll think about it, and then I'll do something, I'll respond to it. And developing inner scripts can be really helpful. Developing inner scripts, particularly for our children on the autistic spectrum, can help them to problem solve in a situation. So an inner script is when we're feeling a certain way, we ask ourselves certain questions. So I'm feeling frustrated with my sibling, so I can. And an inner script, we can give a child an inner script. So we might say to them, right, when you're feeling like this, think to yourself, I'm feeling frustrated with my sibling, so I can go and find a quiet space somewhere else in the house. I can get mum to help me. I can get my older sibling to help me. I can go to my bedroom and do some resistance activities. I can go on my Xbox and have 10 minutes away from my sibling. And in a script, I suppose, is that helping them to problem solve and helping them to think about, when I'm feeling like this, what can I do differently to reduce those big feelings around this? And that can be really helpful. I've got families that I work with where we talk about inner scripts, and we just coach by explaining what an inner script can do and the questions or the responses that we can give. Or you might write an inner script down. So I've got one child that I work with, and he's got a little piece of paper. When I'm feeling like this, I can. So when I'm feeling angry, I can. And all of the ideas are written down for him as visual prompts. So I can go and have some breathing space. I can give myself some time. By visualizing it, especially when we're feeling stressed, if I can see it, I'm more likely to do it. And that can be really helpful for our children with neurodevelopmental conditions. And then finally, another strategy that might be really helpful, and I'm conscious I'm just throwing lots and lots of strategies at you, but hopefully you'll have picked up a couple that you might be able to use and take away. This is one that I really like. This is often really helpful for siblings when they feel a little bit out of control, or where their siblings' behavior, they don't understand it, and actually they feel like there's nothing that they can do to help it, or they feel out of control. And this is the what is within my control activity. So it's just sitting down with a child and saying, when a situation happens, there are certain things within that situation that we can control. So how we respond to it, what we do, is within our control. The things that are out of our control are what other people do. And what we talk to children about is, write in the center circle, what what are the things that you can control within these situations. And then we write in the outer circles, what are things that I can't control. And in the outer circle, the things that I can't control are the things that I try to push away. Because actually there's nothing I can do about those. So rather than getting upset or stressed or worried about it, I'm better just pushing those thoughts out of my mind. And this can be a really lovely one. I worked with a family and they added a second circle, and they added it after the things I can control. Just before the things I can't control, there was a circle that said the things that I can influence. So things that I can influence might be things that they're not solely within my control, but actually I can influence these things by going and doing something to help the situation. So writing it down again, externalizing it, getting it down on a piece of paper can be really helpful to support our children to understand, when I'm in a situation where I can't control what's happening, focus on what I can control and push away the things that I can't. And that can often be really useful. And then finally, promoting nice times together, promoting opportunities to enjoy each other's company. Look at, I suppose, negotiating with our siblings. What do you enjoy doing, and what can you share with your brother or your sister where you can help them to maybe enjoy the things that you enjoy too. Shared experiences are really helpful. Our siblings are the person that we learn some of the most important skills from in life. So opportunities to enjoy our siblings is really important. and providing those opportunities, negotiating with our children around, right, we're going to do this activity today because this is what your brother enjoys doing. Tomorrow we're going to do the activity that you enjoy doing, and helping them to understand that it's important that we take part in both activities, because that's what friendship's about. That's what having positive sibling relationships is all about. And I suppose the importance of just promoting the good times is going to be really helpful. So I hope that that's been helpful. I've given you lots of strategies there, but I'm conscious that we did say that we were going to have some time for questions. So I will stop my presentation now, and I will just welcome Claire back and see what questions have been asked within the.
Hi Emma, yeah, we've had a few questions come through. I think quite a few of them, you know, with the strategies and everything that you've covered, you probably answered a couple of those questions with the strategies, but I'll just go through in the sort of time we've got left. We'll sort of do 10 minutes or so, just running through some of these questions. Okay, so here we go. So I have 4 children with ADHD and ASD. Sorry, I'm going to start that question again. I have 4 children with ADHD and an ASD diagnosis, and only one without a diagnosis. She is 7 and she is starting to notice that she is different from her siblings. She's been acting out almost to fit in with them. Can you offer any advice here?
This is a really good question, and often really common. I find this a lot when we were actually the slide that we were looking at the very beginning around some of the emotions or the thoughts and feelings of our siblings, particularly those siblings without the neurodevelopmental condition. It can be quite common that they then present with behaviours similar to their brothers and sisters, because they're seeing that those behaviours are getting more attention or more time with the adults. I think twofold for me. She's 7, so actually at the age of 7 is at the age where understanding those conditions can be really helpful. So helping her to understand maybe some of the behaviours that her brothers and sisters are doing and the reasons for those behaviours. So helping her to understand ADHD and autistic spectrum condition is a really good starting point. But also helping her to understand that because of ADHD and autism, your brothers and sisters might need a little bit more time from me, but I'm going to put some time aside for me and you as well. And I'm working towards those positive one-to-one times with her, but scheduling them in so that she knows that they're coming can be really helpful. Having special time with her, having special one-to-one time with her might mean that she's more inclined to accept that actually right now these behaviours are tricky, but I know I'm going to get my time with mum or dad or whoever in the family, and that can often then lead to them being much more able to regulate and manage their behaviours a little bit better. So yeah, understanding, helping her to understand the condition that her siblings have got, but then also helping her to understand that she will get time and that you are kind of allocating dedicated time to her as well might help too.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, on to our next question. So do you have any advice for a family that are having to keep siblings separate to avoid fights or meltdowns? The siblings are, well, one is 12 with ASD and PDA, and there's a 7-year-old with GDD and ADHD.
Really difficult one, and I suppose not knowing the kind of context really can be difficult to answer the question. I think if it's for safety, and some families kind of keeping siblings separate is to keep everybody safe within the house, and actually sometimes that's if the situation is significant enough that you're needing to do that from a safety perspective, then that's really important that you do that. I think for me it's about helping the siblings to understand the nature of family dynamics and that we all live under the same roof, and actually I suppose it's about those negotiation strategies, helping each other to understand. Maybe you want to use the stretch zone strategy with the siblings around what is it within the sibling relationship that makes you feel stressed, that's then leading to you two falling out, which is leading to you two needing to be separated. But helping each other to understand each other's points of reference, I think, would be really helpful starting point. You know, what is it that makes sibling 1 get really stressed? What is it that makes sibling 2 get really stressed, which leads to those conflict situations, which then leads to the siblings being separated? Safety is the most important feature in all of this, and making sure that everybody in the house is safe. But I think it's also about helping those siblings to understand things from each other's perspectives. And you might want to use the stretch zone to do that, and sitting down as you know, together and exploring where they overwhelm, or when a child's becoming particularly stressed, and what that's leading to, and what things might be causing those difficulties within the family home as well.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, we've had quite a few questions that have come up. I think you did sort of cover it in the webinar, but about, you know, helping siblings, neurotypical siblings, to feel more involved when, you know, a neurodiverse sibling, when families feel that a neurodiverse sibling is getting more of the family's focus, and they feel like the neurotypical sibling is often left wanting for more attention. So have you got any advice for helping the sibling to feel more involved?
I think a job responsibilities can often be really nice for the neurotypical child, knowing that understanding difference is really, really important. Understanding what's happening for your siblings really important. But also, I've found with many siblings who are neurotypical, having a responsibility that helps their sibling can be really useful too. So building up the sibling around, you know, these are the things that you can do, these are the things that you can support your brother or sister with, and I know that would be, you know, that's really appreciated by your brother or sister, but it's also really appreciated by me as mum or dad or nan, or auntie, or whoever the adult is within the family. So, you know, a role or a responsibility. I worked with a family, and the child who didn't have a neurodevelopmental condition actually became really helpful, and we often had conversations around, you know, you don't find there's things that you find difficult, but the things that your brother finds difficult, you can help him with, because you've got a strength in that. You do know how to regulate your emotions. You do know what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. Your job is to help your brother by doing this. So I suppose it's around making sure that children understand difference, roles and responsibilities, and kind of building self-esteem through, but you're really good at that, so you can help in this way. But also, again, it's back to that, making sure that the neurotypical child has time that's scheduled in and dedicated, which I'm conscious of, that I've said that before, but making sure that that child knows that they are getting that time might really help them to manage kind of the situation a little bit better.
Okay, thanks, Emma. I know we are short on time now, but I'll just try and squeeze one more question in, if that's okay. And if we can't offer any sort of advice on this one, perhaps we can do some signposting to a resource or website afterwards. So any recommendations for helping a neurotypical 4-year-old to understand his older sister's ASC and ADHD?
There's a good starting point. If you go on the ADHD Foundation's website, there's lots of resources that you can print out to have a little look at. I love my role at the foundation is to work with our little ones, and I often use things like the chimp brain analogy. If you have a little look at the chimp brain, to help 4-year-olds understand that we've all got an inner chimp, and our inner chimp is often driven by our emotions, so our happy, sad, worried, anxious feelings. And that for people with autism or for people with ADHD, their inner chimp is quite strong. And when their inner chimp is quite strong, they then can become overwhelmed by their big feelings. Now, I talk with 4-year-olds about we can train our inner chimps and help our inner chimps to manage our big feelings. And it might be that you use the chimp analogy around helping the sibling understand the autism and the ADHD, that actually for your sister, her inner chimp gets a little bit worried, or her inner chimp gets a little bit sad, or a little bit angry, and this is what your sibling needs to do to help that. So that can be a really helpful starting point. But have a little look on the ADHD Foundation's website, because the resource hub, we've got the early years section of the resource hub has got lots of information around understanding ADHD and autism. So it might be that by reading up on that as a parent, you're then able to then explain that to children. So there might be some useful things on there that you can read and digest a little bit after today's session.
Thanks so much, Emma. That was a fantastic webinar and a fantastic Q&A session as well.